All right. So today we're going to go over a few things about Code for Boston. We'll do some introductions, and we're mostly going to talk about how our organization works and how our project process works and ways that we can partner. I'm going to try to keep this presentational part of it fairly short. I think maybe 15, 20 minutes, if we can get it down to that short. And then we'll talk with all of you about the kinds of things that you're here to talk about and see if there are any synergies between your organizations and ours. Does that sound good? Is that what most people are expecting?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So before we get started going into the main program, I thought we would do a little bit of introductions on our side, tell you a bit about us. And I think because we have a fairly light amount of people, maybe we'll do a quick round of introductions for everybody else too. So Matt, you are on the leftmost on this slide. Can you get started or do you need to wait?
No, I can get started. So hi, everyone. My name is Matt Zagaya. I am one of the organizers of Code for Boston. I've been volunteering with the organization for a little over 5 years now. So I started out as a project volunteer, then led a project team, and now as part of the organizing team, go to Code for Boston and do anything but code. I previously worked for a regional planning agency called the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, where I was the lead web developer, and I am now a senior backend engineer at TED conferences, where we work on online video and large conferences for folks. So that is me.
My name is Harlan Weber. I'm a designer by trade. I'm the founder of Code for Boston. I've been doing this work here since our organization started in 2012. I currently work for a small engineering firm called Candace Software, but I just rolled off about 7 years working for the state government in various capacities. For those of you who are here from the state, you may recognize some of my work leading the redesign of mass.gov, which we did a few years ago. You may love or hate me for that. And then I worked for the MBTA for a couple of years in their customer technology team. And you may love or hate me for that as well. So that is what I am doing here. And I can't wait to meet all of you and hear all the things about that you are here to find out about. Annie.
Great. So I am Annie LaCourte. I'm also on the core team at Code for Boston. I've been volunteering with Code for Boston for, I think, 3 or 4 years at this point. In the rest of my life, I am deeply involved in the civic infrastructure in the town of Arlington, having sat on the Board of Selectmen, serving on town meetings, serving on the Finance Committee, which is how I come to be interested in civic technology. In my work life, I am a information systems consultant, mostly configuring Salesforce for nonprofits. And I'm also looking forward to seeing what kind of projects you are all interested in.
The first thing you might be wondering is what actually is Code for Boston? We've said a lot of words here. You've probably seen our website. You may have had Ed or somebody else talk to you a little bit about our organization. But to give you sort of the more formal definition. So Code for America, or Code for Boston, is the local chapter of Code for America's volunteer brigade program. Code for America is a big national nonprofit focused on, helping to bring governments and nonprofits into the 21st century in terms of their technology, design, and product development needs. I don't know if that's the most current slogan, but I think it's pretty close.
I think that's pretty good.
Brigades are volunteer groups all across the country. They're groups of developers, designers, researchers, planners, policy people, data people, citizen activists. Like, it's a pretty big tent. Working in their local communities to build civic applications, open data sources, and generally to help leverage technology for use in the public sphere. We've been around since 2012 here at Code for Boston. We're one of the larger and more active brigades in the network of, I think there are something like 70 or 80 communities all around the country. And we're always in sort of constant communication with each other. We're sharing code, sharing best practices, sharing ideas. So there's a large community of folks just like us who are trying to do similar work all across the country. Today, a lot of the things you're going to hear about, we're going to focus a lot on our project processes, but in our community, at least, we've had a wide range of activities over the years, from working with the city of Cambridge to develop their open data ordinance. So we've done some policy work. We've helped something like 30 of our members find jobs in the public or nonprofit sector. We've worked with city partners to develop RFPs and provide sort of general consulting on technology stuff, which I know was a fairly non-technical way to talk about it, but it's also true. So you can see some stats here on the screen. There's Matt leading us. Normally, when we are not in the middle of a pandemic, we meet typically at the Cambridge Innovation Center in Kendall Square. We have one more person joining. Prior to the pandemic, we meet every week, and we have for many years on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock. Prior to the pandemic, we were meeting with something like 70 to 80 people every week. I think that's right, Matt. Towards the end, it was getting a little out of hand. Since the pandemic, we've gone to more of a, first we went all digital and then to a hybrid model where we do a lot of work on Zoom. We have some people going to CIC right now, but primarily most of our meetings happen still weekly, mostly on Zoom. But for some raw numbers, we've got something like 66 or 6,700 people in our meetup group. We've met very regularly every week since 2012. We passed one city ordinance, held 18 large events. We're fairly active and we have a lot going on. This is a picture of Matt from our weekly hack night. We run other events, as I mentioned. So we've done these Ignite talks, which are super fun. And I can't wait for us to be able to get back in person to do them again. 5-minute quick talks from subject matter experts in various fields related to civics and technology. We run big hackathon events, usually once or twice a year. And over on the right, you can see one of our project teams working in a conference room at the CIC on their project work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our current projects we have going on right now. Did I miss anything in the previous section, Matt, Annie? Anything else we should let these folks know about? Great. So a couple of project highlights to give you sort of a sense of what our projects are like. So the first one that we'll talk about is a Social Security benefit calculator that we partnered with Congressman Seth Moulton's office on, and now it's moved over to the Mass Retirees Group. Is anyone here from the North Shore? Anyone up in Salem or anywhere? Salem, Beverly, in Congressman Moulton's district? No one. All right. But as many of you are state employees, you may be curious to use this calculator yourself. So any of you statees know about the windfall elimination provision? I can't see anybody shaking their heads, so I would love a yes or a no.
I have not.
All right, well, you should. So the windfall elimination provision is a part of the Social Security Code that says that from Massachusetts and 6 other states like it, where we pay into a state pension system, there are certain impacts that can have on your Social Security payout at the end of your, when you retire. And for some reason in Congressman Moulton's office, this was a big thing that came up for his constituents. So we worked with their team to understand the Social Security Code, to build out a form that's a series of questions asking people, how long they worked for the state, in what capacity, what their tax numbers were, and give them a recommendation on, if they're going to, how much money they're going to be subject to, that will fall under the windfall elimination provision that might impact their benefits, and give them some recommendations for things they can do to mitigate that. This was an app that we built all volunteer. We built it with Congressman Moulton's office to start, and then we transitioned it to Mass Retirees when the project was over. It also got mentioned in the congressional briefing about the use of technology with, I think, Jen Polka. And so that was a pretty cool win for us. So that's one kind of thing that we do with local partners. Matt, do you want to talk about Police Data Trust quickly?
Yes, Police Data Trust is a project that we engaged with folks at the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. They have a 3-year grant that includes a coordinator at their organization that starts to look into compiling police incident data. So they wanted to go into different jurisdictions, and they have records about incidents with police officers, and so want to keep track of those. And the idea is that these different jurisdictions have the data in different formats. So they might have different fields or describe those incidents in different ways or categorize them using, sort of different tags. And so what their idea is first we want to standardize this. So build a data standard so that we can start to look at this data and compare it between jurisdictions and know, sort of what does the situation look like in Boston versus what does it look like in New York City. And then secondarily, they're building a product for public defenders. And so the use of the public defenders of this database is, imagine they have a client and that client is charged with a crime by a prosecutor. So they're going to trial. A police officer might be on the stand and you're looking at the credibility of that police officer. And so the question might be, has that police officer had any incidents? What are those incidents like? Are there a certain pattern to those incidents? All those things are important to establishing the credibility or lack of credibility of the police officer as a witness on the stand, and certainly establishing patterns of behavior that might be important for whether or not it's reasonable for someone to be found or not found guilty based off what that police officer might say. So that is the project. So they're hoping to pilot with about 10 public defenders offices, including one here in the Boston area.
Great, thanks, Matt. So these are just two projects we wanted to do sort of a highlight on. Over the last 9 years we've been working, we've done work of a huge variety of types with a wide variety of stakeholders. So we work with City of Boston to build an Alexa skill for city info. We've built our own Twitter bot for MBTA data. We've modeled, for some of you DCR folks, this might be interesting to you. We've done some data visualization and modeling of hazardous drinking water conditions with the Charles River Watershed Association, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to go through this whole list because you can probably read it here. But suffice to say, we've worked with a wide variety of both governmental and non-governmental organizations on project work over the last 7, 8, 9 years. Like I said, we're going to focus mainly on the project side here. So I think it seemed like we wanted to go over mainly how an idea becomes a project. So generally speaking, we have a submission form. If you ever have an idea, if any of your state colleagues have ideas, we have a form on our website. We ask you to fill out a few things, sort of your name, your email, your organization, and the general problem statement framed up in a how might we statement. So we want to know what you're after and how we might be able to help. This goes into our inquiries channel in our Slack, where someone on our leadership team will take a look at it, and we'll usually get back to you within a week. When we say get back to you, that means that we will start having a conversation about your needs, about any of your requirements, must-haves, and deal breakers. We'll schedule that initial intake meeting to gather all that information and have a more in-depth conversation with you. We meet as a leadership team every month, and we go over all of our new project proposals during that meeting. So we'll review them and schedule a follow-up if we have any additional questions. Or just say, let's do it and get started with the project. So we have a couple of criteria that we like to make sure that we have a partner, a project that falls within our mission and our scope. I'm trying to think of all the criteria off the top of my head. I thought I had it in the slide, but I don't. So Matt, Annie, any other things on criteria?
Yeah.
Mission, partner, viability.
I don't matter. Do you want me to?
Go ahead, Annie.
I think we want to be clear about what we do and don't do. So when we're choosing that partner, we want to know that they'll be able to, in some sense, take over or own the project at the end. We want to be sure that it'll be something that we can recruit volunteers for, so that it falls inside of the sort of skill set of what our people do. Those are the things I can think of off the top of my head. Matt?
Yeah, so a couple other things, just in general. So we can't do partisan political projects, completely not allowed, because we're a 501c3. We also can't do for-profit ventures. So that's sort of another big deal breaker. And then I think otherwise, a lot of the things we end up discussing with folks is it's like, is this something that we can actually help with? Like, do the folks that we bring to the table actually help solve your problem in a useful way? And then also, is it the case that you have the bandwidth to engage with the work that we do? Because sometimes in the past we've had, and we'll talk about this later, just challenges where folks are like, okay, here's a problem, and then let's go see you in 6 months. And that part certainly does not work so well. So we'll talk about that part a little bit later in the challenges.
Yeah, and we try to make sure our teams are set up for success. So like typically we don't put people onto things that are mission critical work for like city infrastructure. Our members are all volunteers. We don't want to put them in a position where you're going to have to call them in the middle of the day to say, the server went down, can you fix it? Because what they will say back to you is, I'm at work and I can't do that. So that's the vetting process. After we've approved a project, we start recruiting. So we make a project interest form, we drop it into our various channels of communication with our membership. So our meetup group, our Slack, our newsletter, and we try to find people who are interested in the topic area for this project. Once we've got the right number of people, we schedule a kickoff meeting and we get everybody together to start talking about the needs and the requirements for the project. In terms of staffing, we need to make sure that we think of it as 3 legs of the stool for digital product development. So software engineering lead, a design lead, and a product management lead. We find that our most successful projects have all of those coming from either the Code for Boston side or our partner side. So it just sort of depends on, what level of capability our partner would bring. Sometimes they like to have an engineer leading or a product manager, and we can usually provide the rest. We'll bring in other roles as needed. So on content heavy projects, we'll look for a content strategist or a copywriter, user researchers, various subject matter experts, really anything that we need in response to your needs on the project. We typically have leaders and then some folks in more junior roles. Matt, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it is typically the case we'll ask folks to raise their hand and indicate whether or not they have experience and are willing to be a leader inside one of the disciplines or roles that we're recruiting for. And so the reason is that we get a good group of folks that are coming to Code for Boston. Their motive is they're skilling up. So they've just come from, say, a code boot camp or design boot camp. They've gotten the nuts and bolts and they're starting to learn how to do projects in a group setting. And then we have folks who are very experienced. A lot of their motivations tend to be they want to give back, they want to have impact. They're experienced engineers or designers or product managers at large, well-known companies. And so they're able to provide that mentorship. So we think, having both is important. We're not going to just say, oh, here's only junior folks and good luck. We definitely are cognizant of folks' skills and abilities.
So once we've got the project staffed and kicked off, we go into our regular project cadence. So typically we meet on Tuesday nights. A lot of work does tend to happen between meetings, and Tuesday nights as our time to be together is for planning or strategizing or reviewing things together. In this hybrid world, we use a lot of digital tools to make sure that we're organized and we're working well together. Code usually lives on GitHub. We use Zoom and Slack for in-person and asynchronous communication. And Meetup, of course, tells people generally where we are and how to find us in the wide world of the Boston meetup scene. How a project ends. So after we have a successful engagement, we've built something for you folks. We want to make sure that there's an easy transition into ownership for you as the project partner. We try to work out how we're going to handle ongoing maintenance. And there are a lot of different outcomes that can happen at the end of a project. So we could build a prototype that could, help you decide if you want to go and pursue this as a larger, more enterprise grade project. We could be doing discovery work in terms of prototyping, but also user research and testing that will result in a do not build recommendation. We could have a fully successful product that could be hosted by you, or we could have something temporary that we host and maintain, but usually with an end date. So we've had a couple of projects where like it's temporary, not permanent. Like our polling place project was something that we sort of did temporarily, or the Vaccinate MA project was something we did temporarily but had a definitive end date. So there are a lot of different ways a project can end, and we usually try to make sure we have agreement on those up front, or that we're in really good communication over the course of a project, because sometimes needs and goals can change over the 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year that we work on a given thing. Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about challenges?
Yeah, so I can talk about some of the different challenges we've encountered with projects. And so the reason that I think it's useful to talk about these is as you're noodling on the different sorts of things that could be a Code for Boston project, the first thing to think about is that these software projects are more than code. So it's not merely, like we will build it and they will come. A lot of times we've built something, and I think one of my first projects I worked on, it was a really neat thing. It was to encourage folks to do things to reduce their energy usage. Did it with the city of Cambridge. But ultimately, because it was focused on end users, we needed an acquisition strategy for those end users. So nothing that like we did with developing the product itself went wrong. Everything was built. There is a product. Folks could use it. It worked for the folks that used it, but you still need to find those folks. And sometimes that's email marketing. Sometimes you need to pay money for ads. Sometimes you have influencers and that sort of thing. So there's plenty of ways to do that marketing. But as you think about something, if it's going to be used by a large group of folks, you want to make sure you have budget allocated for that within the project. We also have a bucket of projects that tend to be a little more common. I call them projects that help the helpers. So they'll be used by caseworkers or, a small group of internal folks, and it's helping them do their job a bit better. And then the nice thing is that surmounts the marketing challenge, because you're really, taking an existing process or group of folks and letting them use that. Next challenge, connecting with actual users for interviews. So it can be, depending on what the project scope is, challenge to reach out to folks who would be the user of that product. It's very important that our designers, user researchers are able to talk with real users as opposed to folks that are synthesizing the user needs. Because as we develop things, as our folks try things, they may need additional context or ideas. And so just need to figure out getting access to them. And usually that is something that partners facilitate or attempt to facilitate. We've also, on the technology end, folks will come in and be like, hey, can you do this? But it's like Microsoft.net, or I don't know, some old like Fortran or COBOL or something like that. And for better or worse, the answer is no. We have, I think, a very specific set of skills within the community. And so for that specific set of skills, that is very much like what we're able to provide. And so that means that, we have to meet that community where they are. You can't just say that, oh, well, our place is generally a COBOL shop. It's like, no, that we wouldn't be able to help with that as much because folks don't have that skill. So web applications in Python, Ruby, and JavaScript generally where we are. And then last but not least, deadlines. I think that we can't really like make promises. Folks are volunteering on nights and on weekends in their own time. We can talk a little bit about sort of general timelines. We have like a sense of how long things take, and we can use that sense to try and predict. But and sometimes folks will double down, and so if the demo night's coming up, it's like, okay, yeah, we're all gonna spend this upcoming weekend and really like push through to have something great for demo night. Like those sorts of things happen. But if you're like, this needs to be delivered in 3 months, or we don't get the grant or something like that, that tends to be a little bit of a tougher needle to thread. So just being aware that we'll have to be flexible. And then, are you doing the why do a Code for Boston project, or you want me to?
No,
Oh,
I can pick it up. There's a wide variety of reasons why one might do a Code for Boston project with us. It's a great way to engage your community. You can find folks who you might be interested to hire. This has happened on a couple of occasions where project members have gone on to work with our partner, either immediately after a project or at some point afterwards. From a strategic perspective for your agency, obviously there's a way to expand your impact and the work that you're doing, but also a role we often find ourselves in is sort of de-risking bigger projects that you may not be able to get budget for. So if you have a big idea and you want to do a prototype, but you can't go get your capital budget folks to give you a couple of bucks for it, we can do a small prototype that then you can use to validate and prove to those folks that there's a real there. And in some cases, you might just want to learn more about how software projects work. So, technology is a real thing. It's not for everybody, but it is for us. And so we can usually help folks understand how technology can work best in their agencies. There's a lot of reasons. These are just some of them. And that's mostly what we've got going on. Matt, if you have anything else to say, let's get it out. Otherwise, we'll get right into Q&A.
Yeah, let's take questions.
Well, I'll start answering a question that came through in the chat.
Harlan, do you want to stop sharing so people can kind of see each other a little better?
I guess I can stop